welcome to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad Zoom podcast on siblings and family balance. We're thrilled to have two people who have dedicated a lot of their time and energy to siblings and know a thing or two about this. And we have locally Benji Rubin, who is a law partner with his dad in the Rubin Law Offices here in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And I'll let you make a more formal introduction, Benji. And then we have somebody who I've come to learn about more recently, who I understand is a visionary in a lot of different ways. This is Don Meyer from Washington State. And what I've learned about Don in just last month or so is that he had the foresight to do a lot of things. One of them is to create the Sibling project going back 25, 30 years ago. And beyond that, he had the foresight to put a book together, of which I got a copy of. It's called Uncommon Fathers: Reflections on Raising a Child with Disability. And this is a book that he edited. There are 19 contributors, individual dads, who wrote essays. And this book was published in 1995. So here we have on the call with us tonight somebody who's not an expert in the area of all things siblings, but he was focused on working with dads, raising kids with disabilities well before the 21st Century Dads Foundation was in existence and well before the Special Fathers Network come into existence. So Don, I think this is divine intervention that we are here tonight together. So Benji, why don't you make some brief introductions? Don, you can make some brief introductions, and then I'll come back to each of you, and we'll talk about siblings and family balance. So Benji Rubin, the Zoom stage is yours.
All right. Thanks. So I am a sibling, of course. My brother has severe autism. My father founded, obviously, a law practice dedicated to serving families of children with special needs, thanks to my brother, and as he always says, life taking a fork in the road. I always say I was born into being a member of this advocacy world and community of being a sibling, rather than have it be a shift or a fork in the road in my life. I was born into it being a sibling. I'm the president of SIB, Supporting Illinois Brothers and Sisters. We're the Illinois chapter of a national organization called the Sibling Leadership Network. And we're there as a resource and a network for brothers and sisters. There's a lot of peer support out there for parents. There really isn't much out there for siblings. Of course, Don Meyer has been a pioneer in that for decades now, thank God. So we definitely stand on the shoulders of all the work that Don has built to make siblings a focus and a priority, and actually even discussed amongst the disability community. And so I sit on a lot of different nonprofit boards, serving people in the developmental disability world in particular, speak to all kinds of organizations monthly, sometimes several times a month in that world. Both as a sibling, I speak sometimes on the topic specifically of siblings, and then in general about special needs planning, which is what our law practice is dedicated to, is estate planning and guardianship for families of children with special needs. So it's a long and short of that.
Benji, thank you for joining us, and thank you for the dedication that you have made, your family has made to the world of special needs, and in particular with the work you do around siblings. So Don Meyer, thank you for joining us this evening, and the Zoom stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. For 28 years, I was the lucky guy who is the director of the Sibling Support Project, which is a national organization dedicated to the lifelong concerns of brothers and sisters of people with special health, developmental, and mental health needs. And we've always had a number of sibling-related initiatives. We're probably best known for SIB shops, which are peer support and education programs for school-age brothers and sisters, and that provide this peer support and information within a highly recreational context. They started at the University of Washington, and there are now 500 SIB shops in about 8 countries, and almost every state has at least one SIB shop. But we also have initiatives for adult SIBs. I started SibNet, which is an online group for adult SIBs almost 25 years ago. Started off as a listserv, then it was a Yahoo group, now it's a closed Facebook group. Since then, we've also started SIB 20 for 20-something SIBs, roughly around 18 to 30, early 30s. And then we also have one for teen SIBs, because sibling issues are indeed lifespan issues. And we've written and created a number of books for and about siblings. But my work with SIBs is really an outgrowth of work I initially did with dads of kids with disabilities. In 1978, I was a very green graduate student at the University of Washington and had a professor who suggested that I do something for these dads. It sounded novel and needed, and I was the only male early childhood special ed teacher that particular year. So we had every other Saturday morning meetings where dads brought their kids with disabilities, and we had opportunities to talk, to interact with play with the kids, and hear a guest speaker. And I'm proud to say that model, it started in 1978, still exists to this day. It's now called the Fathers Network, and it's moved to the Kindring Center, which is a suburb of Seattle, in Bellevue, the suburb of Seattle. I recently retired, but the Sibling Support Project is now very capably run by Emily Holl, who herself is a SIB.
Well, Don, thank you for joining us. Thanks for the dedication to the work that we're both focused on, and this group is most interested in. And I thought maybe to get this started, I would just ask you, Don, a question to start. Benji mentioned how he got involved, as a sibling to an older brother with special needs. And I don't know that within your introduction that you made reference to, what was it that drew you to being involved in special needs? Do you have a child or a family member with special needs yourself?
No, actually, I got started working with kids with special needs when I was a freshman in college. It was by the encouragement of all things, a phys ed teacher who's one of these new school PE guys who thought physical education should be for everyone, not just jocks. And he had a Saturday morning program that paired students with kids with disabilities in this big gym with trampolines and all sorts of equipment. And he just kind of followed the kids' lead. And he hung out with two different kids at two different hour slots. And I did that throughout college, and even did it as a summer job. And I sort of got bitten by the special ed bug, and I taught. I got a degree in special education, and long story short, I taught kids with profound disabilities in Minnesota, in the Minneapolis area, kids who were just coming to school for the very first time, even though they were 6 to 13 years old. They were only becoming, because it was the passage of Public Law 94-142. And these kids were developmentally very young. And then there was this emerging notion of early intervention, not a novel thing now, but it was then. And the University of Washington was one of the pioneers in intervening with babies and toddlers who have Down syndrome. And again, that was a novel idea. And families came literally from all over the world to the University of Washington. And that's how I got involved. And, and then this graduate school opportunity changed my life.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. It is interesting how some experiences like the one you described can change the trajectory of your life and your career. And if your experience has been like mine with advocating for kids and dads, me only since 1997, and you a little bit longer than that, it seems like you blink and where's the time gone, right? And we are so much farther advanced today, especially as it relates to the way we think about disability and the idea of inclusion and acceptance, but we have so much more work to do, which is exciting, and I think part of what we're all drawn to. Benji, I'd like to go back to you, and if you would just go into a little bit more depth about your experience, about working with the SIBS organization locally and some of the program or the work that you do, and you know, go from there.
Sure. I am lucky enough to have stepped into an organization that was founded about maybe 10 years ago, 10 years before I joined the board of SIBS. And we were, again, founded, like I said, to be there to support that wasn't really there for brothers and sisters as the parents are aging. You have to remember that go back 30, 40 years, there weren't that many individuals who were living at home, with significant disabilities. A lot of people were being institutionalized, even to the 80s. And a lot of them were not having a strong family, continuity and family involvement. And so the idea of siblings stepping into the role of taking over as advocates for when their parents age is a relatively newer concept in terms of something that would be publicly and public and widespread, I would say. Also, people would not talk about their sibling with disabilities. There's a long history of all this that probably been covered in all kinds of podcasts that you've covered before. And so it's the idea of really supporting siblings is really becoming more and more important, because we are really the first generation that we're seeing where it's completely expected that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are going to outlive their parents in almost all cases, and those siblings are going to have to be there for them in some capacity. And what that looks like can be completely different, and depending on all kinds of factors, including, of course, the nature of those disabilities. So we have a really broad spectrum of board members and of active participants in our SIBS group. We do have a Facebook group. We used to be a Yahoo group, which has shifted over to Facebook like everyone else, like with Don's group. And it's really nice because people are able to post things in our closed SIBS group that they would not be comfortable posting or talking about, maybe certainly where the parents may be in earshot or other people, because they may not feel as judged. One of the common topics that comes up is people are getting married, and what is the role of their sibling? And there are some of the siblings in our group who are going to have their sibling be their best man or their maid of honor, and there are some siblings who don't even want them at the wedding. And our position as siblings is to be there to support those siblings and to validate their feelings, and for them not to feel judged or feel that, again, validation is a huge thing. Don talks about it a lot. Validation is so important for siblings to have. It's important they have it at an early age. That's what SIB shops are, really can help with a lot. I think therapy is a huge thing. I always advocate therapy for regular therapy for every sibling, no matter what really the nature of the disabilities are, and especially situations like my brother who had severe autism and had behavioral issues. I mean, it's trauma. There's no other way to describe it than growing up with a sibling with severe behavioral issues. And so it's very important that we advocate for siblings, for younger siblings, encourage them to participate in SIB shops. And we talk to parent groups. We talk to them about getting their kids involved in SIB shops. We talk about, for the adult siblings, we have we're not just there to deal with things related to their sibling. It's just kind of a network of people that have shared life experiences. So, we have barbecues, we have bar nights, we, have a holiday party where we just get together and hang out, and the topic is not always going to be about our sibling or about disability policy or anything like that, although we do a lot of those things. We help them advocate and talk about advocacy and disability policy as well. But we also are there just as like friends, as this network of people that have this shared connection, and that can feel comfortable voicing their frustrations. I remember one sibling saying that their sibling was, was really upsetting their child because, they have, this their sibling, so they're an adult now. Their sibling with Down syndrome is now in her 40s, let's say, and she was being really rude, basically, to to her daughter, and she was like, and her daughter's getting very upset about it, and it was like, well, how do we deal with that interaction? And and that we have, your aunt obviously has Down syndrome and doesn't really understand fully that she's being rude, but maybe to some extent she kind of does, and we kind of do need to explain this to her, and it's not okay for her to be rude to you? And how do we deal with that? And those are dynamics that, really it's nice to have siblings out there to share those experiences, maybe share some, things they've come up with or ways how they've handled these things, to really, help improve everyone's quality of life, the individual with disabilities, the sibling, and then just to help them as they navigate the maze of what happens when mom and dad are gone. What does this look like? And we have too many situations where mom and dad pass away or get sick and it's a crisis. And these siblings come to us saying, what do I do? What do I do? And it's a disaster. And that's the last thing we want. And that's why we encourage siblings. We like to work with siblings in their 20s and 30s because mom and dad are probably still alive and relatively healthy, so that we can get them to push them and support them in pushing their parents to figure out what that looks like. And they may have done even an estate plan and done a special needs trust, but that's not even close to enough. It's figuring out what does that full life in the community look like for their child, and for our brother or sister. And that is really, a lot of times it's siblings who are pushing it, because we're the ones who are going to have the consequence. We're going to witness the consequences. We may, in fact, have to be the most impacted by the consequences, maybe even more so than the individual with disabilities. And certainly the second most, even if not the most, the second most person impacted. It's not the parents. Parents are going to be gone, right? And so we're there to help siblings, to provide support for siblings as they have these difficult conversations with their aging parents.
Thanks, Benji. Just one question before we go back to Don, and then Don, you can answer the same question if you have a different read on this. The Sibling Support Network, or the SIB shops and different organizations, serve a very valuable role. And what I'm hearing you say, Benji, is that the sweet spot might be individuals in their 20s and 30s. But practically speaking, what's the earliest age that an individual might interact with the sibling support sort of community? Benji,
do you want Benji to go?
Do you want me to start and then go over to Don, or?
Just a quick answer from your own perspective.
So, I mean, I think SIB shops are really the entry point, right? I mean, I think we really want to encourage people to get into SIB shops. They start at 7, I think is the earliest program, right? 7 years old. So that's a pretty obviously early starting point, when kids are really starting to develop their own identities and all kinds of stuff's going on by the time you have someone who's 7 years old. And social interactions change and everything else, friends, peers, how they interact with their friends with regard to their sibling with disabilities. So 7 years old is the starting point, and really we want to defer to SIB shops. We do help facilitate SIB shop. We do SIB shop facilitation. We do training for SIB shops. So we are really big supporters of it. So that's really the kind of locus for younger siblings, starting at age 7, really. There's a teen SIB shop program in Chicago, which is great. I don't know if there's several others across the country, but I think that it's not as common as the younger ones. But then there's a lot of the teens are like, oh, I'm too cool for this or whatever. But and then the adult stuff really starts. There's usually kind of a gap. People go to college, they kind of set up in their own life and kind of build their own kind of independent life and what that looks like. And then usually like 23, 24, 25, either they move back to their hometown or maybe they move far away from home. And that's usually when they're going to kind of interact with us, our adult sibling group, and start to connect with us and our support.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Benji. Back to you, Don.
I agree with everything Benji said. He said it most eloquently. It's hard to start too early, and it's never too late. Given that sibling issues are lifespan issues. Preschoolers or SIBs will have some unique concerns. Senior citizens or SIBs will have some unique concerns. And those concerns are going to change and evolve throughout the individual's and indeed the family's lifespan. So even with preschool SIBs, it would not hurt for them to just simply know other brothers and sisters who also have a SIB who has a disability. But then into the school age years, we knew that this was affecting them when they were younger, and so we wanted to provide that support. Now, SIB shops, I didn't invent the notion of bringing brothers and sisters together, but when I looked around what other people had done with sibling groups, what I saw did not speak to the 11-year-old in me. They seem to describe kids sitting around in folding chairs with some therapist talking about how their life was so screwed up because they had a SIB who had Down syndrome. and it's not something I would have wanted to give up a Saturday afternoon to attend. So we wanted to have it intrinsically rewarding for kids to come to, lots of recreation, lots of fun, food activities, but tucked in here and there are chances to talk about the good parts and maybe not so good parts of having a SIB with other kids who get it, and get some information about some of the services their brothers and sisters are getting. But then kids indeed need information and support as they get older. On SibNet, our Facebook group for adult SIBs, almost every day we have an epiphany from a new member who has found her way onto the list. And she sees what other people have written and she says, oh my God, I am so glad I found this group. I am 40 years old and I've never, ever, ever talked to anybody what it's like to have a brother who has autism. And we would never make parents wait 40 years to meet their peers. You know, if any of us were to meet a parent of a newly diagnosed kids, what's one of the first things we'd want to do for that parent? We'd want to introduce them to other parents. But historically, this has not been so much important for brothers and sisters. So with regards to those adult siblings that Benji was talking about, those young and adult sibs, Benji's and my friends and colleagues at the Sibling Leadership Network wrote a book that Emily Holl and I edited called The Sibling Survival Guide, because I can't begin to tell you the number of 35-year-old women who have a couple of kids of their own, a husband, a career, and a brother with autism and some pretty significant needs there are out there. And many of them are floundering. They don't know what to do. Their parents have not done an especially good job of planning for the future. And so they're mightily worried about it. So we wrote this book for them. But then adult SIBs who are older are now have other concerns. You know, maybe their parents are no longer with us and they're living with the consequences of what their parents did and did not do correctly. And even more so, they may be wondering what happens if Brother John outlives me? And they have to make appropriate arrangements. Luckily, there's people like Benji and his dad who really know this territory really well and can help, you know, guide them through some of the legal mazes. But yeah, SIBs need support throughout the lifespan.
Don, thanks again. One of the questions I had, and we have a few dads on the horn with kids that are teenagers and even younger. And I'm wondering, from a practical standpoint, what advice would either of you, Benji or Don, suggest to the parents, the moms and the dads, to try to, from a very young age, make sure that there's this family balance, right? So we're not looking at it from, you know, the adult siblings perspective, but we're trying to put ourselves in the shoes of these young parents who might have grade schoolers, who might have middle schoolers, high schoolers, to try to make sure that there's this appropriate family balance, because all too often the child with special needs requires more time, requires more energy, requires more of the family's resources. So is there any pearls of wisdom or advice that you can draw on from each of your collective experiences?
I have two thoughts off the top of my head. One is I've heard many, many times, and I've learned many, many times, is that SIBs want to be heard. Being heard makes all the difference in the world. Can't always fix a problem, but if you know that you've been heard, it makes all the difference in the world. All too often, SIBs get the message that, oh, you shouldn't be upset with your brother, you know, because, you know, he's got Down syndrome. It's like, well, he trashed my room, you know, and he got into all my private stuff, and they're righteously angry, and they need to know that it's okay for them to feel angry. And a lot of us who are in the support, who are interested in supporting other families, we learn how to actively listen, or we might even take a class in active listening. Well, those same principles can be applied to one's own children. And I'm forever recommending the book How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber. And it's a crash course in active listening, and there's ones for teens as well. So I encourage you to do that. The other thing is to carve time out of your crazy busy schedule to spend one-on-one with those typically developing kids, to let them know by deeds and by words that you care for them as an individual, and during that time, they have your undivided attention. And I know that's really easy for me to say and hard for parents to pull off, but I have heard several moms offer what is more or less the same advice. These moms say, you know what I do? Every month, every other month, I yank my daughter out of school. We play hooky. We might go out and go to lunch. We might take a hike. We might go for a drive. We might get our nails done. We might go shopping. But whatever we do, we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk. And whatever relationship, whatever school she may have missed that day is more than compensated by the relationship maintenance we've had at that time. So those are two off the top of my head. Oh, and with regards to teens, we published books for young sibs. One's called Views from Our Shoes, one for adult sibs called Thicker Than Water. But we also have one for teen sibs called the Sibling Slam Book, which featured contributions by, I think, 80 teen sibs from 4 countries. Writing it was like herding cats, but I think kids will find themselves in the pages of that. So, Benji, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I just lost when you were taught with your last with where we were starting with the actual general topic, because I know the last thing you're talking about with
Advice to
teens.
parents. Advice to
Just the parents, right? We're focusing on the parents. That's what it was. Okay, so. What I tell parents is one of the things I like to do is I bring up something that my parents did, which is you were talking about, Don, about playing hooky from school. When we on summer vacation, so my brother went to an overnight camp program, and there's a lot of these across the country that are dedicated to people with like intellectual and developmental disabilities. They have one-on-one staff ratios. In our situation, the aide was someone who'd worked with my brother for many years, so it was a really good setup. And for 2 different years, he went to that overnight camp program. And so we had 2 weeks basically where it was just my sister, myself, and my parents. And my parents took advantage of that opportunity to go on a vacation, just the 4 of us. And we got to be that quote unquote typical family for, that week that we were on vacation. And so I encourage that if you ever have that opportunity, it's a huge opportunity to take advantage of. So that's one thing that I always talk about. And then just, a Sunday, maybe only one of the parents can really do it, but maybe you take them to a ball game, or they take them to, the ballet, to whatever this child's interested in or would like to do. That would be quality time with that parent where the other sibling's not there. And so we just highly encourage all those kinds of things. Take advantage of opportunities when they arise, where the sibling who has special needs is doing something else and is taken care of, and also just one-on-one time with individual parents, and the other parent takes care of the sibling with disabilities. And those 2 things are definitely really important. And then also just giving them space. Don talks about this a lot too. I know about this idea of, letting them be whoever they're going to be, and kind of grow and mature. And at different stages of development, they may be resentful of their sibling, and they may be, feel jealous of their sibling, and at the same time be very protective of their sibling. Maybe they don't feel protective of their sibling at certain times. Maybe they have conflicted feelings about their sibling and feel protective and jealous and resentful and angry and all of those things, and that's okay. And they could be embarrassed by their sibling. There may be a stage of their life they're embarrassed by their sibling. So we want to encourage parents to allow the sibling to be whoever they're going to be, and to grow through that, and give them the space, but also the supports that they need to go through that. And that includes therapy. That includes, professionals to help them, guide them through it, and the peer support that they can get through sib shops, so that they can grow and develop and mature and figure out what their relationship is with their sibling, and what their view about everything is as they develop their own sense of self. And so that's definitely really important.
Thanks, Benji. I'd like to open it up. We have a couple of dads on the line, and see if there's any other questions before we go forward. Al, Nathan, do you have any questions or
Yeah, I
observations?
have 3 teenagers, and we're trying to make space and room for them. It's hard to carve out the time, but the times I have gone with one of my kids somewhere, I've never regretted that. And so, yeah, it's a good reminder to make those kind of things happen. And I listened to another webinar that Don, you did. It was very helpful yesterday. So just I doing a lot of thinking on the whole sibling thing now because of not realizing how important it was. I mean, knowing it, but not really understanding it until more recently.
Yeah, there's lots to learn. And I think that's one of the best things that parents can do for their typically developing sib is to learn about life as a sib. And, I think especially with teenagers, there's a lot of oftentimes feelings of resentment when the world seems to be revolving around this kid who has special needs. It's Jamie this, Jamie that, Jamie all the time, the United States of Jamie. And I think to the extent to which we could, I know it's, again, easier said than done, not let the world revolve around Jamie, have Jamie just, not be the sun in the family solar system. Maybe maybe the center of the family's universe is church, synagogue, the community center, soccer, softball, and let Jamie and everybody else revolve around that. And to tag on to what Benji was saying is, I will send David a link to a paper called "What Siblings Would Like Parents and Service Providers to Know." And it's like 20 bullet points. But the number one is a right to one's own life. And that while they might, siblings make amazing contributions to the lives of their brothers and sisters, but parents should be mindful of making plans for their sibs. A lot of sibs grow up thinking that they have been born with a job description. And I do indeed know sibs who were conceived with a job description. And that is who's going to take care of Sharon. I mean, who of us would like to be conceived with a job description? So to the extent possible, I think that if we give sibs our blessing to have a life of their own, not only will they appreciate it, they will benefit from it, but chances are everyone's going to benefit, especially that family member who has the disability. Because chances are, dollars to donuts, they will be involved in the lives of their sibs in the days to come. But what's the preferable condition? To feel like you've had no choice and you're doing it, but you kind of resent it? Or to have made a loving choice and said, okay, I've had my life, I'm doing this, I'm willing to make some accommodation. To me, the choice is obvious.
Pearls of wisdom. Thank you, Don. Nathan, did you have any questions as a super young dad?
I've got the whole world ahead of me. Although I'm an older father, I've got 2 very young girls. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Oh, your life is rich and full.
Yes, full. Yeah, right now we're at like somewhere between 5 to 7 therapies a week that I'm primary active at this point. And so I think the biggest question is, how do I recognize the landmines before I step on them? When it regards to how my neurotypical daughter is processing my involvement with our parents' involvement with our special, as well as when that orbit starts to revolve too much around our special, that it requires an awareness. So how do I avoid those landmines?
Well, I will also let David know about a link to a paper that I hope he will share with you. And it's called "How to Let young siblings know that you care. And I surveyed probably about 100 adult sibs. And I said, in what way did your parents, other relatives, service providers acknowledge you and let you know that they cared about, you as an individual? And it's amazing what they said. Sometimes they're big things like, they made a point. We always made a point of, going on a vacation or whatever. And other ones were simple little things. I mean, I'll never forget this one woman who said, I remember going with my sister to therapies when I was 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old, and the nun that was at the clinic gave me a cookie and asked me how I'm doing. She remembers that to this day. So those little things, just time that perhaps that you set aside with is it typically developing daughter or son?
2 girls.
2 girls, yes, with your one daughter, just to spend a little time just with her, and kind of make that a semi-sacred time, very special time. That will make all the difference. And then, read that paper, talk to other parents, read up about other things that parents have written about SIBS. Not to plug my own book, but like read Views from Our Shoes as a bedtime reading and have that be a springboard for discussion. And as she gets older, try to help her learn more about her sister's Angelman. And if you have trouble finding the most appropriate way to share that with your daughter, your typically developing daughter, seek the counsel of other people in the Angelman's community.
Benji, you want to talk a little bit about what the kids are thinking, that they're thinking about what the role is going to be at a much earlier age than we might think?
Yeah.
Sure. So there was actually a study done by Easter Seals. This is now 12 years ago. No, it wasn't that long, maybe 10 years ago, where they looked at, they interviewed siblings of all ages, including a lot of very young siblings, and they interviewed them and asked them questions. And they were finding that siblings at 10, 11, 12 years old were talking seriously about what the world would be like when their parents had died with their sibling. They had talked about how their sibling's going to move in with them, how they're going to have, they're going to have a bedroom for them wherever they live, even if they get married and have children, or that they can't get married and have children because they're going to be a parent for their sibling when their parents get sick or pass on. And it's really sad because the parents have not talked to them about this. They think they're protecting them. They think that they are, giving them, not putting the burden on them. But as we say in the sibling world, the jig is up. Okay.
Yeah.
We know we're going to be there in some capacity, and we, in many cases, want and expect that. But we certainly, the more tools you can give us to make that successful, the better. And to avoid the discussion is not a solution, and it makes it way worse. We want siblings to be involved at an age-appropriate level as early as possible. I want to see siblings who are 7 or 8 years old having this idea that, when you're an adult, you're going to have your own life, and that your brother or sister is going to have their own life, and you're going to be there to support them and look, and make sure things are going okay for them. But you're not going to be expected for them to move in with you. Maybe when they're 10 or 11 or 12, there are a lot of programs and stuff you're worried about, financially, or so you're starting to think about, the money is something, and, there's stuff that's going to be there for them, and we're also going to take care of and have a special fund for them, and that'll be taken care of. And when they're 15 or 16 and 17, you get to more serious, more specific topics about what are these programs that are actually supporting them, and how does it work, and they have staff. Now maybe we're talking about group. Are they going to be in a group home, or are they an individual who needs maybe just 5 or 6 hours a week, or 5 or 6 hours a day of support? What kind of support do they need, and what does that look like, and what plans we have in place for how we're going to create those supports and establish them so that when when mom and dad are out of the picture or start to fade out of that picture as they age, that those things are already in place, and then these siblings can plug in. So again, at age appropriate level, to keep them in the loop on these decisions and not have it be this kind of just black box of what's going to happen with mom and dad.
And keeping them involved with the special needs planning, so that we have situations where elderly parents pass away and now their kids who are 40, the siblings, 40s, 50s, 60s, have no clue as to who's paying for what with the government, who's taking care of this, what benefits are they on, helping them understand this at the appropriate time.
They can plug in.
Mind. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, write this stuff down, keep records of all this. They can also be used for reference, but also just keep them, at least once a year, maybe have, at the family reunion at Christmas time, at this time, whatever, Thanksgiving, whatever time of the year the family might get together, spend a few minutes just kind of updating what's going on.
Touch on the importance of a letter of intent for the
I think for kids is just to keep it kind of an open topic, like the disability. You don't want to make it a taboo topic, that people are afraid to go there. And I'm like Benji and Brian are saying, I'm forever begging parents to make plans for their child's future, so that if their 11-year-old daughter says, Mommy, when Sean and I grow up, I want Sean to come live with me. Mommy could say, well, honey, if that's what you want to do when you grow up, and if that's what Sean wants to do when he grows up, that's fine. I'm pro-choice. But if that's not what you want to do, don't worry. Daddy and I are busy making plans. And we're going to talk about that a lot in the days to come.
Thank you, gentlemen. Brian, did you want to add anything else? You've been around the block a few times.
I prefer seasons. I think, Benji, put the letters of intent where sometimes you don't want to, the parents don't want to talk about it, but their thoughts about the future, things about don't let your brother be alone with Uncle Harry, But doctors they see that you never want them to see again.
The history, right? The stuff that the siblings don't, they're not,
not gonna remember.
Right, and also they may not be involved with day to day. Again, as we keep talking about, they get married, they have their own families. I have a toddler and an 11-month-old, so I am very busy between that and working full time. That we don't have it's hard to keep track of everything going on in my brother's life, honestly, and if we flash forward 20 years it'll be different, but for right now it's very difficult, and so we want to have it written down so we can go to it and review it and reference it if mom and dad can't get sick suddenly or to pass on. We talk about just letters of intent about kind of where the estate plan documents are, so people aren't tearing apart the house to find them. We talk about writing that letter of intent, final arrangement stuff. That's talk about a taboo topic. No one wants to talk about that. So many of our parents really want their son or daughter to be buried next to them. They're not going to have their own children. They're not going to, that's not going to be their future, and so they want them to be buried next to them. Well, if no one knows about that, no one knows actually about a plot for it, how is that even going to be written? How is it going to happen? And no one wants to talk to their kids about that. The kids certainly don't want to hear about that. They're going to, plug their ears. So write this stuff down in a document that they may not really look at until you're gone anyways. Letter of intent.
It's a living document. You may be updating this periodically. And if the siblings aren't the right people, it's other people that are going to take care of things, you make it available. You make it available. It's a PDF file, and you send it out to people.
Got it. Such good advice.
Yep. Well, thank you for sharing. What I'd like to do is make sure that in the, call it show notes or the notes to this, what will be a YouTube video that we'll post, is that we make reference to all the different resources that have come up. And in addition to that, there's something called the Sibling Leadership Network. And I'm wondering either Don or Benji, if you could just talk to what that organization does, because in a perfect world, we would have included somebody from the Sibling Leadership Network on the Zoom here, but time is very limited.
I was there at the early days of the Sibling Leadership Network. It was started by John Kramer, Katie Arnold, and Tamar Heller at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And I was, I had run the Sibling Support Project for a number of years, and I was so glad when they started that, because what they did, you know, there's lots of good work to be done on behalf of SIBs, but what they're able to do that I wasn't able to do is to advance policy work on behalf of brothers and sisters, you know, and so they are the seat at the table for siblings. You know, they're trying to advance policies that will be advantageous to people with disabilities that reflect a sibling's perspective. And they have, Benji, how many state chapters are we up to? About
28, 20, something like
yeah.
that. We're approaching 30.
And some of them are pretty grassrootsy ones, and others are more realized, like Illinois SIBs are. But they are a collection of SIBs and SIB supporters. So you don't actually have to be a SIB to belong to Sibling Leadership Network, and it doesn't cost you a cent to belong. So if you just Google Sibling Leadership Network, you can join up, and you'll get email from them from time to time. They don't bombard you with stuff, and you know, they're not hitting you up for money all the time. But it's a really good organization. We get together every couple of years, and the most recently was in St. Paul, and it has this wonderful family reunion feel, you know, when we get together, because everybody there gets it and does it. Benji, what else would you add?
No, so I mean, just like it's every state chapter is really different. So yeah, some are really pretty robust and have a state conference every year, and others are much more grassroots. Like you know, we're kind of somewhere in the middle. We do have a pretty active board. We do a lot of programming, but you know, it's not the level of, you know, some of them have full-time or part-time staff that are paid. So it's very different in each state. The national conference is really an amazing time to meet with other siblings across the country, and you know, every other year. And so that's been, you know, a wonderful thing to connect with siblings across the country. And it's really also about advocacy. Is a huge part of all this is how do we advocate better for our siblings from a sibling perspective. You know, and our sibling perspective is different than that parent perspective. So,
yeah, and there's also a research component. There are a number of people. I mean, there's a whole research initiative as a part of the SLN, and a lot of the people who are doing the research are on sibling issues are SIBs themselves, and so they understand what they're looking into.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for putting a good plug in for the Sibling Leadership Network. So before we close, I'm wondering if there's any last thoughts, Benji, and then Don, you'd like to share with the group, and then be thinking about the wider audience that might be watching or listening to this as the weeks and months and years go by.
So, I mean, I think I've really, you know, said, I would just kind of hit on all these topics about how important it is that siblings be involved in the planning process, that it not be something that's done without them. You know, there's this slogan in the disability advocacy or self-advocacy world of, you know, nothing about me without me. But, you know, when it comes to planning for the future, you know, really siblings are the ones who it's going to be about, because they're going to be carrying it out. And so, making sure that siblings are part of the process, and that as the process evolves, you know, that it is, you know, we don't want a situation where siblings are, you know, where parents have expectations about siblings that are not really, the siblings don't understand or don't agree with. You know, if parents are doing certain things that they just think the siblings will do, but have never talked about to the siblings about that idea, and this great setup that was working fantastic for their son or daughter is a disaster once the parents are gone, because the sibling cannot and just had no intention of ever doing that. That was not part of their future, and so they need more support basically than what they currently are getting from, you know, government resources or private paid dollars, and now they have to come up with a solution. And so, you know, having that open dialogue, having it be open and frank, and making sure that parents are leaving it open so that they don't feel you know, judged, or, you know, that it's a realistic discussion.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything Benji said. The other thing I would say is that, you know, if you're the parent of a teenage sibling, do remember their teens. You know, I remember one mom in a class, you know, a workshop that I did, she was talking about, how difficult her 13-year-old typically developing kid was. And, I couldn't help but think, can you think of a suckier year in your life than 13? I mean, how much money would somebody have to pay you to be 13 again? So, we have to remember that's part and parcel of that. And the best, my wife and I have 4 kids. They're all adults now, but 3 out of the 4 contributed to my white hair, right? And now they're lovely people. And some of the best advice I got when our kids were presenting some challenging behaviors was from a book that said, given that, there's no mental health issue or serious drug problems, realize that no matter how bumpy those teenager years are, by the time they're in their 20s, they will emerge, for better or for worse, with your values. So there is hope. And I'm proud to say that with all 4 of our children, we have a wonderful, wonderful, almost adult relationship. So we got through that. The other thing I would like to add is to remember that the single strongest factor influencing a sibling's interpretation of his brother or sister's disability will be, guess what? The parent's interpretation of the disability. So the parents perceive it as being this life-searing tragedy from which there's no escape. Well, shouldn't be too surprised that they're typically developing kids perceive it that way. On the other hand, if they perceive the disability as a series of challenges that they have little choice but to meet with as much grace and humor as they can possibly muster, they have every reason to believe at the end of the day, they're typically developing kids will perceive it that way as well.
And David, before you sign off, I want to complain you're not wearing your shirt.
Well, I was going to say something about you being the model for the evening with the Special Fathers Network swag, Brian. I'm pretty impressed. The only problem is with the black background and a black shirt, it looks like your head is just sort of floating.
Yeah.
No, it's a good look. I like it.
It is floating. Yeah.
Well, let me say thank you, Benji. Thank you, Don, for sharing your time and your wisdom with our audience here on the call live, and then with the YouTube that'll be produced and going forward. So where do we go from here? Let me just make a plug for the upcoming bi-weekly Zoom call, which will take place on August 4th. The topic is being emotionally present. So I will not be leading that topic because I am not one of the people that is emotionally present as much as he or she would want to be, but I'm sure we'll have a good roster of people that can speak to the topic. Again, thank you, Benji and Don, for sharing your thoughts and your time with us. And that's all for today. Thanks for being part of the Dad's bi-weekly Zoom call, and we look forward to catching you on the next call.